It was a chilly autumn evening in 2018, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I had just finished a long shift as a police officer in a small town in Ohio, where the nights were usually quiet, and the most excitement came from speeding tickets or the occasional drunk driving arrest. As I drove home, the flickering streetlights cast eerie shadows on the empty roads. Little did I know, this night would be anything but ordinary. Just as I pulled into my driveway, my radio crackled to life. Unit 24, we have a 911 hang-up call from the old Miller farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Can you check it out? My heart raced. The Miller farmhouse had been abandoned for years, rumored to be haunted, but as an officer, I had to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and headed back to my cruiser, trying to shake off the creeping dread settling in my stomach. The drive to the farmhouse felt longer than usual. The wind howled through the trees, and the road twisted like a serpent through the darkness. As I arrived, the moonlight illuminated the dilapidated structure, casting an almost sinister glow on its broken windows and peeling paint. I parked my cruiser, the engine's hum replaced by an unsettling silence. I stepped out, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness as I approached the front door. It creaked open with a gentle push, revealing a dusty interior that smelled of decay and abandonment. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight as I moved deeper into the house, calling out to see if anyone was there. Hello? This is Officer Harris. Is anyone here? No answer. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I pushed forward, thinking it was just a prank call. As I made my way through the living room, I noticed an old family portrait hanging crookedly on the wall. The faces in the photo seemed to watch me, their smiles unsettling in the dim light. I shook my head, trying to focus on my duty. Suddenly, I heard a faint noise from upstairs, a soft whisper that sent shivers through my body. It sounded like a child's voice calling out. I hesitated, but my instinct as an officer kicked in. I climbed the creaky staircase, each step echoing in the stillness. The hallway was lined with closed doors, each one hiding untold secrets. I took a deep breath and approached the first door, gently pushing it open. The room was empty, filled with dust and memories long forgotten. I scanned the room, my flashlight beam dancing across the walls. Then I heard it again, definitely a child's voice, softer this time, almost pleading. It seemed to come from the end of the hallway. I felt a mix of fear and concern. What if there really was a child in danger? I moved toward the last door, my heart pounding louder with each step. I reached for the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as I rattled it, calling out, "Is someone in there? Please answer me." The whispers stopped. Silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. Just when I thought I was imagining things, I heard a soft thud from behind the door, like something falling. With a surge of adrenaline, I kicked the door open. The room was dark, save for the moonlight streaming in through a cracked window. It looked like a child's bedroom, with faded wallpaper and a bed that hadn't been slept in for years. In the corner, I spotted a small, shadowy figure. My heart sank. It was a little girl, no older than 6, with disheveled hair and wide, frightened eyes. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They won't let me go." Confusion gripped me. "Who won't let you go? Where are your parents?" I asked, my voice shaking. She pointed to the closet, her small hand trembling. "They're in there. Please help me." I approached the closet, my instinct screaming that something was very wrong. As I reached for the door, a cold breeze swept through the room, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing, just the empty, eerie room. Swallowing my fear, I opened the closet door. Inside was nothing but old clothes and dust. No sign of anyone else. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, and I looked back at the girl. But she was gone. The room was now empty, as if she had never been there. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back, trying to process what had just happened. Suddenly, my radio crackled again. Unit 24, we received another call from the Miller farmhouse. Are you there? It was dispatch, but my heart sank as I realized what they were saying. The call wasn't a hang-up. It was coming from inside the house. I'm here, I shouted into the radio, my voice rising in desperation. I need backup. Something's wrong. The dispatcher sounded confused. What do you mean? We have no record of a call from you. I felt a chill run through me, the realization that I might be alone in this haunted house. I rushed back downstairs, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I needed to get out. Just as I reached the front door, I heard the girl's voice again, clearer now, echoing through the halls. Help me! I froze, my heart racing as I felt an icy hand grip my shoulder from behind. I spun around, flashlight beam shaking, illuminating a figure cloaked in darkness. The features were indistinct, but I could feel malice radiating from it. Leave this place, it whispered, the voice sending ice through my veins. She is ours now. Terrified, I bolted out of the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I leaped into my cruiser and sped away, not daring to look back. The cold night air filled my lungs, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I returned to the station, panting and disoriented, but my fellow officers listened in disbelief as I recounted my story. They sent a team to the farmhouse, but when they arrived, they found nothing. No signs of a girl, no evidence of a call, nothing but an empty, decaying house. To this day, I still wonder about that little girl. Was she a ghost? A figment of my imagination? The farmhouse was later torn down, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear her voice whispering in my dreams, reminding me of the night I faced something far darker than any criminal. It was a quiet Wednesday night in April 2020, and I was patrolling the streets of my small town in New Jersey. The pandemic had cast a shadow over everyone's lives, and most people were tucked away in their homes, creating an eerie stillness that was both unsettling and comforting at the same time. I had been on the force for nearly a decade, and I'd seen my fair share of odd things. But that night would prove to be different. Around midnight, I received a call from dispatch about a disturbance at the old Thompson house. The Thompsons had moved out years ago, leaving the house abandoned, and it had become a local legend, known for strange noises and sightings. As I drove down the deserted streets, the weight of the night settled in my stomach, but I pushed the feeling aside. After all, I was a cop, and it was my job to check out reports, no matter how spooky they seemed. When I arrived, the moon hung high in the sky, casting an unsettling glow over the property. The house loomed before me, its windows dark and hollow, like empty eyes. I stepped out of my cruiser, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots, the only sound breaking the silence. I grabbed my flashlight and approached the front door, which hung slightly ajar, creaking ominously as I pushed it open. "Hello, this is Officer Ramirez," I called out, my voice echoing in the darkness. "Is anyone here?" There was no response, only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and the scent of mildew. The house felt frozen in time, with old furniture covered in white sheets and cobwebs hanging like ghostly curtains. My flashlight beam danced around the room, illuminating faded photographs on the walls. They depicted the Thompson family in happier times, their smiles contrasting sharply with the desolation that surrounded me now. As I moved deeper into the house, I heard something, a faint whispering sound, almost like a conversation happening just out of reach. My heart raced as I strained to listen, but it faded away, leaving only silence. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the creeping unease. I had to focus on my job. I continued my search, moving cautiously through the dimly lit rooms. Just as I reached the kitchen, I heard the sound again, more distinct this time. It was coming from the basement. Against my better judgment, I made my way toward the basement door, which was slightly ajar. I could feel the air grow colder as I approached, an instinctive warning that something was off. "Hello? Is someone down there?" I called, my voice wavering slightly. Silence. I opened the door wider, revealing a dark staircase leading down into the unknown. My flashlight flickered as I took a deep breath and began my descent. Each step creaked ominously beneath my weight, the darkness closing in around me. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a small, dimly lit room. The air was heavy with a damp, musty smell. As I scanned the room with my flashlight, I saw old boxes and broken furniture scattered about. But then I noticed something strange. A small, tattered doll sitting in the corner, its glassy eyes reflecting the light. I felt a chill run down my spine as I picked up the doll, its worn fabric a reminder of childhood innocence now corrupted by neglect. Just then, the whispering returned, louder and more urgent. It sounded like a girl's voice, pleading, "Help me. Please help me." My blood ran cold. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the small space. I felt a sudden rush of air, and my flashlight flickered before going out completely, plunging me into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my backup flashlight, my heart racing. When I finally got it to work, the beam illuminated the room, but now the atmosphere had changed. The doll had moved, just a few inches, but enough to make my skin crawl. I was not alone. "Get out," the voice whispered again, now sounding closer. I turned, instinctively looking for an exit, but I could feel a presence behind me. It was as if the shadows themselves were alive, closing in around me. I backed away slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash upstairs, as if something heavy had fallen. Without thinking, I bolted up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I burst through the kitchen door, only to find it empty, yet the oppressive feeling lingered, wrapping around me like a fog. I reached for my radio, trying to call for backup, but it crackled with static and then went silent. I felt trapped, and my breath quickened as I darted toward the front door. Just then, I heard the girl's voice again, now filled with anguish. "Please don't leave me." The desperation in her tone made me freeze. I turned back to face the darkness, my mind racing. "Who are you?" I shouted, desperate for answers. The room fell silent, and then I heard soft crying, echoing through the halls. I took a cautious step forward, drawn to the sound. It led me back to the basement door. Somehow, I knew I had to confront whatever was down there. With a deep breath, I descended the stairs again, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. As I reached the bottom, I saw her, a translucent figure of a little girl, no more than 7, with long dark hair and a white dress that billowed around her. She stood near the doll, her eyes wide with fear and sadness. "Help me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They won't let me go." "Who won't let you go?" I asked, my voice shaking. She pointed toward the far corner of the room, where shadows seemed to writhe and twist. As I turned to look, a cold breeze swept through the basement, chilling me to the bone. The shadows coalesced into a darker shape, a figure, indistinct but menacing. In that moment, I understood. The house was not just haunted. It was a prison for this girl's spirit, trapped by something malevolent. My instincts kicked in, and I knew I had to protect her. "I'm going to help you. Just hold on." I reached for my radio again, praying it would work. This time, it crackled to life. "Unit 24, we're dispatching back up to your location. Are you in danger?" "Yes, please hurry," I yelled, my heart racing. The figure in the corner lurched forward, its shadowy form growing larger, as if trying to swallow the light. The girl looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "Don't let them take me." "I won't," I promised, adrenaline coursing through me. Just then, the basement door slammed shut, and the temperature dropped drastically. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. But then, I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder. I turned back to the girl, my flashlight illuminating her face. "You have to go," I urged. "You need to find the light." In an instant, the shadows lunged at me, but I stood my ground, focusing on the girl. "You're stronger than this. You can be free." The sound of footsteps echoed above me, and just as the darkness began to close in, I felt the girl's presence fade, a light breaking through the shadows. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice drifting away like a gentle breeze. My fellow officers burst through the door just as the shadows dissipated, leaving only silence in their wake. They found me standing in the basement, breathless and shaken, but the girl was gone. "Are you okay?" one of my colleagues asked, concern etched on his face. I think I just helped a spirit find peace," I replied, my voice trembling. The Thompsons' house was eventually torn down, but the memories lingered, a reminder of that chilling night. I often wonder about the little girl and the darkness that once surrounded her. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear her voice whispering in the wind, a haunting reminder of the echoes of the past that refuse to be forgotten. I always thought of myself as a rational person, someone grounded in reality and not easily swayed by superstitions or ghost stories. I had spent over 8 years on the force in a mid-sized city in Illinois, responding to everything from petty theft to violent crimes. But one night, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about the world. It was a chilly evening in October 2021, the kind of night that heralds the onset of winter. The streets were quieter than usual, with most people staying indoors, either due to the pandemic or the impending cold. As I patrolled my assigned area, I felt a strange sense of foreboding settle over me. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the empty streets and alleyways. Around 10 p.m., I received a call from dispatch about a reported disturbance in one of the alleys off Maple Street. As I drove through the dimly lit streets, my mind replayed the various stories I had heard about that alley. Rumors of drug deals gone wrong, gang activity, and even whispers of ghostly figures seen roaming in the shadows. I shrugged off the thoughts, attributing them to the overactive imaginations of locals. I parked my cruiser at the mouth of the alley, the narrow passageway stretching out before me like a dark tunnel. The air was still, and the only sound was the distant hum of the city. Grabbing my flashlight, I stepped out of the car and walked toward the alley, its walls lined with graffiti and litter. I called out, "This is Officer Reynolds. Is anyone there?" No response. I moved deeper into the alley, the beam of my flashlight illuminating the damp brick walls. The further I went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the shadows were closing in around me. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound, a soft whimpering, almost like a child crying. I froze, straining to listen. It was coming from deeper within the alley, near a dumpster that had seen better days. My instincts kicked in, and I moved toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called again, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. As I approached the dumpster, the whimpering grew louder, more urgent. I peered around the corner, shining my flashlight into the darkness. What I saw made my blood run cold. A small figure huddled in the shadows, partially obscured by trash bags. It was a girl, no older than 8 or 9, her clothes dirty and torn. She looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes, and I felt an overwhelming rush of concern. "Hey there, sweetheart. Are you okay?" I knelt down to her level, trying to soothe her fear. "Please help me," she sobbed, her voice trembling. "I can't find my mom." I glanced around, scanning the alley for any signs of adults. "Where did you last see her?" I asked gently, keeping my tone calm. She pointed down the alley, but her expression was one of sheer panic. "Back there," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They took her. They said not to go outside." "Who took her? Where did they go?" I pressed, feeling a sense of urgency. "The shadows," she replied, her eyes darting nervously, as if she expected something to leap out at any moment. "They said if I stayed quiet, they wouldn't hurt me." My gut twisted at her words. Shadows? It sounded insane, but the fear in her eyes was palpable. "Okay, listen. I need you to stay right here. I'm going to get you some help," I said, trying to reassure her. I stood up, my mind racing. This was not just a missing child situation. Something was seriously wrong. I reached for my radio to call for backup, but just as I did, the alley grew colder. A shiver ran down my spine, and I felt an unnatural chill in the air. My flashlight flickered, then died, plunging me into darkness. I cursed under my breath and fumbled for my backup flashlight, my heart racing. As I clicked it on, the beam illuminated the alley again, but something was different. The girl was gone. In her place was a shadow, dark and thick, swirling unnaturally near the dumpster. I stepped back, instinctively reaching for my duty weapon. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice echoing in the emptiness. The shadow twisted, elongating as if trying to take form. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. It was as if the very air was heavy with malevolence. I turned to run back toward my cruiser, my heart pounding like a drum. As I sprinted toward the entrance of the alley, I heard the girl's voice again, clearer now, echoing around me. "Help me. Please don't leave me." Panic surged through me as I glanced back, but the alley was empty, save for the swirling darkness. I reached my cruiser, fumbling to get the door open. My mind raced as I called out to dispatch, my hands shaking. "I need backup at Maple Street Alley. I have a child missing and something unnatural here." As I waited for my fellow officers to arrive, I glanced back into the alley. The shadows seemed to pulse and twist, as if mocking my fear. The girl's cries echoed in my mind, and I felt an intense need to go back, to find her. But the primal urge to flee kept me rooted to the spot. A few minutes later, I heard the familiar sound of sirens approaching. Relief washed over me, but as my fellow officers arrived, I felt a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. I explained what had happened, recounting the girl and the darkness that had overtaken the alley. One of the officers, a veteran named Sergeant Lewis, frowned. "We've had reports of strange occurrences in this area before," he said, glancing nervously toward the alley. "Let's check it out." We entered the alley together, the flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. But as we approached the dumpster, I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me again. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to shift and move, almost alive. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The group looked around, confusion and concern etched on their faces. "Maybe it was a prank," one officer suggested, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "No, it wasn't," I insisted. "She was real. I saw her." We continued to search the alley, but it was like searching for a ghost. There were no signs of a struggle, no indication that a child had ever been there. The alley felt desolate, void of life. The more we searched, the more unsettled I became. Suddenly, Lewis stopped. "Did you hear that?" he asked, tilting his head. I strained to listen, and in the stillness, I heard it. A faint whimpering, like that of a child. "It's coming from over there," I said, pointing toward the end of the alley, where the darkness seemed to deepen. We moved cautiously, each step heavy with trepidation. As we reached the end of the alley, the sound grew louder, more desperate. I could feel my heart racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins. But when we rounded the corner, there was nothing. Just a dead-end wall, covered in graffiti and grime. "Where is she?" I whispered, panic rising in my throat. Suddenly, my flashlight flickered again, then went out. The others' lights followed suit, plunging us into darkness. I felt the oppressive weight of the shadows pressing in around us, and I could hear the whimpering growing fainter. In a moment of pure instinct, I turned and ran back the way we came, my heart pounding in my chest. I heard the footsteps of my fellow officers following close behind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was right behind us, chasing us through the darkness. We burst out of the alley into the safety of the street, gasping for breath. I turned to the others, desperate. "We have to go back. We have to find her." But the fear in their eyes told me all I needed to know. "It's too late," Lewis said, shaking his head. "We'll report this to dispatch, and maybe we can get the area searched. But we can't go back in there." Frustration boiled inside me, but I knew I had to let it go. There was nothing more we could do at that moment. We made our way back to the cruiser, where I tried to process what had just happened. Later that night, as I sat in my apartment, the girl's face haunted me. Her pleading eyes, the way she called out for help. It felt as if the shadows themselves had stolen her away. I thought about how we had searched the alley and found nothing, and a sense of helplessness washed over me. In the following days, I reported the incident to my superiors, who dismissed it as an overactive imagination brought on by stress. They told me it was a prank, a figment of my mind after a long shift. But I knew what I had seen, and the experience left a deep mark on my psyche. Weeks passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the girl was still out there, trapped in that alley, lost in the shadows. I found myself driving past the alley more often, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or hear her voice again. Each time, the darkness seemed to mock me, but I couldn't stop myself. Then one night, as I was driving home from a late shift, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement in the alley. My heart raced as I pulled over, the urge to investigate overwhelming me. I stepped out of my cruiser and made my way down the alley once more, the familiar chill creeping in around me. As I reached the dumpster, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I called out, "Is anyone there?" But only silence answered. My flashlight flickered to life, illuminating the alley once more, but I felt an inexplicable pull to look deeper into the shadows. Then I heard her voice, soft and pleading. "Help me." The sound sent chills down my spine, and I hesitated. The shadows swirled around me, and I could feel their weight pressing in on my mind. but the girl needed me. I took a deep breath and pushed forward, focusing on the sound. As I reached the end of the alley, I saw her again, her small figure illuminated by the moonlight, looking just as she had the first time. "I thought I lost you," I said, my voice shaking. "Help me," she repeated, her eyes filled with tears. "They won't let me go." "I'm here," I promised, my heart racing as I moved closer. "I won't leave you again." But just as I reached for her, the darkness surged forward, enveloping me in a cold grip. I stumbled backward, fighting against the shadows that wrapped around me like a vice. The girl's figure flickered in and out of existence, and I felt a profound sense of loss. "No, don't go," I screamed, but the darkness pulled her away, deeper into the alley. In that moment, everything shattered. I felt the weight of despair as the shadows closed in, and I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I might never save her. I turned and ran, bursting out of the alley and back into the safety of the street, gasping for breath. The experience left me shaken, a profound understanding that some shadows cannot be chased away. Though I reported my findings, I felt a haunting sense of dread that I would never find the girl again. The shadows in that alley held secrets I couldn't comprehend, and I would forever be haunted by the echoes of her voice. As a police officer in a small town in Ohio, I'd encountered all sorts of strange situations over the years, but nothing could prepare me for the series of events that unfolded on that fateful night in April 2022. I was working the night shift, a time when the streets were mostly quiet, and most people were fast asleep in their homes. It started with a call from dispatch just after midnight. A woman was reporting strange noises coming from her neighbor's house. At first, I thought it was just another case of a concerned citizen hearing typical nighttime sounds, a creaking house or rustling trees. I couldn't have been more wrong. I arrived at the scene and parked my cruiser on the street, the cold wind biting at my face as I stepped out. The neighborhood was shrouded in darkness, with only a few porch lights illuminating the otherwise silent homes. I approached the house, which belonged to an elderly man named Mr. Hargrove. He had lived there for decades and was known to keep to himself. Knocking on the door, I called out, "Mr. Hargrove, this is Officer Mills. Are you there?" Silence hung heavy in the air, and I knocked again, this time harder. After a moment, I noticed a flicker of light coming from the back of the house. My instincts kicked in, and I decided to check it out. I made my way around to the back, where I found a dimly lit porch. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear soft, low murmurs coming from inside. I pushed the door open and stepped in, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Mr. Hargrove," I called, but my voice echoed eerily through the empty rooms. The living room was a mess. Furniture was overturned, and papers littered the floor. A chill ran down my spine as I took a step further inside. The murmurs grew louder, almost sounding like a conversation, but I couldn't make out any words. I continued to explore, my flashlight beam dancing over the walls, revealing old photographs of Mr. Hargrove and his late wife. As I entered the kitchen, the voices stopped abruptly. I felt an unsettling sensation, as if someone was watching me. I scanned the room and saw that the back door was wide open. I stepped outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of Mr. Hargrove, or anyone who might have been there. "Mr. Hargrove, are you outside?" I shouted. But once again, silence was my only reply. I moved cautiously into the backyard, my instincts screaming that something was wrong. That's when I noticed footprints in the damp grass, leading away from the house. They looked fresh, and my heart began to race. I followed the tracks as they meandered toward a nearby wooded area. The further I went, the more uneasy I felt. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying in the wind, casting strange shadows on the ground. My radio crackled to life, bringing me back to reality. "Mills, this is dispatch. Are you still on the scene?" "Yeah, I'm following some footprints from the Hargrove residence," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear creeping in. "Copy that. Be advised, there's been a report of a missing person in that area, a woman named Clara Mitchell, last seen earlier today." The news sent chills down my spine. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. The footprints led me deeper into the woods, where the trees closed in around me and the darkness thickened. Just as I was about to call for backup, I heard a faint sound, a soft cry, barely audible over the rustling leaves. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out, hoping against hope that it was Clara. I pushed forward, my flashlight illuminating a small clearing ahead. The cry grew louder, almost pleading. "Help! Please help me!" I rushed into the clearing and stopped dead in my tracks. There, in the center, stood a figure. A woman, disheveled and pale, with wild hair framing her face. It was Clara Mitchell. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. She appeared to be in shock, her eyes darting around as if she were searching for something, or someone. "Clara, thank God," I shouted, but she didn't respond. Instead, she backed away, pressing herself against a tree as if it could protect her from something unseen. "Clara, it's me, Officer Mills. You're safe now. What happened?" She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. He's coming. You have to run." "Who's coming?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice calm. But before she could answer, a low growl echoed through the clearing. The sound sent chills down my spine, and I felt a primal instinct to flee. I stepped closer to Clara, but she shook her head violently. "No, you don't understand. You have to go." The growl came again, louder this time, reverberating through the trees. My heart raced as I scanned the shadows, searching for the source of the sound. It was then that I saw it, a figure moving between the trees, dark and hulking, its eyes glinting in the faint light of my flashlight. I instinctively drew my weapon, heart pounding in my chest. "Clara, we need to get out of here," I shouted, but she didn't move. Instead, her expression turned from fear to sheer terror as she pointed behind me. "Run!" she screamed. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the edge of the clearing. But as we started to move, the figure lunged from the shadows. It was massive, its form barely visible, but I could feel its presence looming over us. "Go! Now!" I shouted, shoving Clara forward as I turned to face the creature. It was then that I realized it was not a wild animal, but something more sinister, something human. The figure let out a low growl that turned into a chilling laugh, echoing through the clearing. "You shouldn't have come here, officer," it taunted. Fear surged through me as I backed away, keeping my eyes on the figure while still trying to lead Clara to safety. We stumbled through the underbrush, the sound of footsteps behind us growing closer. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in, and I knew we had to escape. Just as we reached the edge of the woods, I heard the figure call out to us, its voice dripping with malice. "You can't escape. You're mine now." I pushed Clara ahead of me, and we burst into the open air, the moonlight flooding over us like a lifeline. I could hear the creature crashing through the underbrush behind us, but I didn't stop. We sprinted toward the road, adrenaline pumping through my veins. As we reached the pavement, I could finally see the flashing lights of my cruiser in the distance. "We're almost there," I urged Clara, my voice hoarse with fear. We sprinted toward the car, and I quickly fumbled for my keys as we reached the door. Once inside, I locked the doors and started the engine, my heart racing as I glanced back at the woods. The creature had stopped at the edge, its dark form looming in the shadows. Clara trembled beside me, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that thing?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice shaky, "but we need to get you out of here." I hit the gas and sped down the road, leaving the woods and the terror behind us. As we drove, I called in the incident to dispatch, requesting backup and reporting Clara's condition. I felt the weight of what we had just experienced settle heavily on my shoulders. It wasn't until I reached the safety of the town that I allowed myself to breathe. Clara sobbed quietly beside me, and I reached over, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now. You're going to be okay." But deep down, I knew that whatever we had encountered that night would haunt me forever. I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness held secrets we weren't meant to uncover, and that some things were better left hidden in the shadows. As a police officer in a small town in Oregon, I had always believed that my job was to protect the community, but nothing could prepare me for the night I spent in Hollow Creek. It was a quiet evening in October 2022 when I received a call about a disturbance at an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The place had a notorious reputation, a relic from a time long gone, known for its dark history and unsettling stories. When I arrived at the scene, the sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the house. Its weathered wood and broken windows made it look like a scene straight out of a horror film. I parked my cruiser and grabbed my flashlight, feeling a sense of unease settle in my stomach. I had heard the tales about the house, how people claimed to hear strange noises at night and see shadows moving in the windows. Most people dismissed it as local folklore, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. I approached the front door cautiously and knocked. "This is Officer Daniels. Is anyone in there?" I called out, but only silence greeted me. I pushed the door open, the creaking hinges echoing through the empty halls. The air was stale, filled with the musty scent of decay. As I stepped inside, my flashlight beam illuminated the dust-covered furniture and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. "Anyone here?" I shouted again, my voice reverberating off the walls. Just then, I heard a noise coming from the back of the house, something that sounded like muffled cries. My heart raced as I moved cautiously toward the sound, my flashlight flickering ominously. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, the shadows growing darker around me. When I reached the back room, the noise abruptly stopped. I shone my flashlight into the dimly lit space, revealing a small figure huddled in the corner. It was a girl, no older than 10, with tangled hair and dirt-streaked clothes. She looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Help me," she whimpered. "Hey there, it's okay. I'm Officer Daniels," I said softly, kneeling to her level. "What are you doing here? Are you lost?" "They won't let me leave," she said, her voice trembling. "They're watching." "Who's watching? Can you tell me?" I asked, my instincts flaring as I glanced around the room, half expecting someone to jump out at me. She pointed to the shadows behind her. "They're in the dark. They don't like it when I talk." Panic rose in my chest. I didn't know if this girl was in danger or if she was simply lost and scared. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "I need you to come with me. I'll get you out of here," I said, reaching out my hand. As she took my hand, the air grew colder. I felt a sudden gust of wind sweep through the room, and the temperature dropped even further. It sent shivers down my spine, and I instinctively turned to look at the doorway. The shadows seemed to deepen, as if something was lurking just beyond the edge of the light. "Stay close to me," I instructed, guiding her toward the door. But as we stepped out of the room, the atmosphere shifted. The house felt alive, the walls almost closing in around us. I glanced back at the girl, who was now staring wide-eyed at something behind me. "Run!" she screamed suddenly, pulling away from me. I turned just in time to see a dark figure emerging from the shadows, a silhouette that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. It loomed over me, its presence oppressive. My instincts kicked in, and I sprinted after the girl, my heart racing as I fought against the feeling of dread that clung to me. "Don't look back," I shouted as we dashed through the narrow hallways, the sound of footsteps echoing behind us. I could feel the darkness closing in, almost reaching out to grab us. We burst through the front door and into the open air, but the feeling of being chased persisted. I could hear the girl sobbing beside me as we ran to my cruiser. I quickly unlocked the door and ushered her inside, my hands shaking. I hopped into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, locking it just in time. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to catch my breath. The girl nodded, but her eyes were wide with fear. "They don't want us to leave," she whispered, glancing nervously at the house behind us. I turned to look at the old structure, the shadows seeming to writhe against the fading moonlight. "Who are they?" I asked, feeling a chill creep up my spine. "The ones who used to live here," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're angry." I knew I needed to get her out of there and to safety. I started the engine and pulled away from the house, but as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching us from the darkness. The girl remained silent, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. Once we were back on the main road, I decided to call for backup. I explained the situation to dispatch, my voice steady despite the fear lingering in my mind. "I found a girl at the old Hollow Creek house. She's scared and alone. I think there might be something supernatural going on there." "Copy that, Officer Daniels. We'll send someone your way," the dispatcher replied, but I could hear the skepticism in her voice. As I drove toward the station, I tried to comfort the girl. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Emily," she said, still looking out the window, as if expecting to see something following us. "Please, can we go back? I need to help my mom." "Your mom is at the house?" I asked, my heart sinking. "What happened to her?" "She's trapped. They won't let her leave," Emily said, her voice breaking. I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't just leave her mother behind, even if it meant facing the darkness again. "All right, Emily, we'll go back together, but you have to promise me you'll stick close to me, okay?" She nodded, her eyes filled with fear, but also a glimmer of hope. We turned around and drove back to the house, the oppressive feeling returning as we approached. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. When we arrived, I parked the cruiser and grabbed my flashlight, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. "Stay close," I instructed Emily as we approached the door. It creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the shadows inside seeming to swallow the light. Together, we ventured into the darkness, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Where did you see your mom last?" I asked Emily, trying to keep her focused. "In the back room," she replied, her voice trembling. "But it's not safe." "We'll be careful," I assured her, but the feeling of dread was palpable as we moved deeper into the house. The walls seemed to close in, and I could hear faint whispers echoing through the halls, unintelligible but filled with anger and despair. We reached the back room, and I shone my flashlight inside. The space was empty, but the air felt charged with tension. "Mom," Emily called out, her voice breaking. Suddenly, the temperature dropped again, and I could see my breath fogging in the air. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman with hollow eyes and a mournful expression. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing with despair. I realized with horror that this was Emily's mother. "No," I shouted, stepping back as I felt the walls closing in around us. "We have to go." But Emily ran toward her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm here." "Emily, don't," I yelled. But it was too late. The moment she reached her mother, the figure dissolved into the shadows, and a cold wind swept through the room, knocking me off my feet. I scrambled to my feet and lunged for Emily, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. "We have to leave now," I shouted, urgency flooding my voice. As we turned to run, the whispers grew louder, an angry chorus that seemed to follow us. "You shouldn't have come here," they screamed, and I felt the darkness clawing at my heels. We sprinted through the house, the shadows swirling around us like a living entity. I pushed Emily ahead of me, urging her to keep moving. We burst through the front door and into the night, collapsing onto the grass outside. I looked back at the house, the shadows retreating as if they were pulled back into the darkness. "What just happened?" I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "They're angry because they lost their home," Emily sobbed, her eyes filled with tears. "They want us to stay." I held her close, feeling the weight of the night settle heavily on my chest. The police backup arrived shortly after, and I relayed everything that had happened. The officers were skeptical at first, but Emily's story was consistent, and they agreed to investigate the house further. As the sun began to rise, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had escaped the darkness, but I knew the haunting of Hollow Creek would linger in my mind forever. I vowed to return one day, not just to protect my town, but to uncover the truth behind the shadows that haunted that old house and the souls trapped within. As a police officer in a small town in Idaho, I'd always believed that most of the crimes I'd encounter would be run-of-the-mill: petty thefts, domestic disputes, and the occasional bar fight. But one night in June 2021, I found myself in the midst of an unsettling mystery that would haunt me for years. It started with a call just after midnight. Dispatch received a report of a missing person from a local family. The woman, Sarah Thompson, had gone out for a jog earlier that evening and hadn't returned. Her husband was frantic, claiming that she never missed her nightly runs. With a sense of urgency, I headed to their home. Upon arriving, I found Sarah's husband, Mike, pacing back and forth in the living room, his eyes wide with worry. "She should be back by now. This isn't like her," he exclaimed, running a hand through his hair. I tried to calm him down and asked for details about her routine. He described how she usually ran a specific route along the riverbank near their home, always returning within an hour. I decided to check the area, and as I drove along the narrow road that led to the river, I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. The trees loomed overhead, and the moon cast eerie shadows across the path. I parked my cruiser near the jogging trail and stepped out, shining my flashlight into the darkness. "Sarah, are you out there?" I called, my voice echoing through the stillness. I started walking along the trail, scanning the ground for any signs of her. The night was unusually quiet, with only the rustle of leaves in the wind. As I walked, my mind raced with possibilities. Where could she have gone? After about 20 minutes of searching, I spotted something on the ground, a red scarf caught on a branch. I recognized it immediately as Sarah's. My heart sank. I picked it up and continued down the trail, a knot forming in my stomach. The path twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the woods, and with every step, the shadows seemed to thicken. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard a faint sound coming from the nearby bushes. It was a soft whimper, almost like a cry for help. I rushed over, pushing through the underbrush. "Sarah, is that you?" I called out, my heart pounding. As I stepped into a small clearing, my flashlight beam illuminated something that made my blood run cold. There, lying on the ground, was a woman, but it wasn't Sarah. It was another young woman, unconscious and bruised, her clothes torn. Panic surged through me. I immediately called for backup, kneeling beside her to check for injuries. She was breathing, but unresponsive. Just as I was about to assess her condition further, I felt a chill creep up my spine. From the shadows of the trees, a figure emerged, tall and imposing, shrouded in darkness. My instincts kicked in as I grabbed my radio and called for immediate assistance. "I need backup at the river trail. There's a woman down, and I think there's someone else here." The figure stepped closer, and I could see a glint of metal in their hand. My heart raced as I recognized it as a knife. I stood up, placing myself between the unconscious woman and the approaching figure. "Step back," I shouted, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. To my surprise, the figure froze, a smirk spreading across their face. "You're not going to save her, officer," they said, their voice low and taunting. "She's already gone." Before I could respond, the figure turned and bolted into the trees. Without thinking, I pursued them, adrenaline surging through my veins. I called out for backup again, the sound of my own voice echoing in the dark. The chase led us deeper into the woods, branches clawing at my uniform as I tried to keep up. I could hear footsteps ahead, but they were growing fainter. Just as I thought I was losing them, I stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. The door hung off its hinges, and a dim light flickered from inside. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but I pressed on, determined to find Sarah and the man responsible for this. As I stepped inside, the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. The flickering light came from a lantern on a table, illuminating disturbing photographs on the walls. Pictures of missing women, their faces twisted in fear. My stomach turned as I realized the horror of what I had stumbled upon. Then, from the shadows, I heard a soft voice. "Help me." I turned quickly, shining my flashlight into the corner of the room. It was Sarah, tied to a chair, her eyes wide with fear. "They're coming for you," she whispered, panic etched across her face. Just as I rushed to untie her, the figure appeared again, blocking the door. "You shouldn't have come here, officer," they hissed, advancing toward me. I felt a surge of fear, but fought to remain calm. "Get away from her," I shouted, pulling my weapon. The figure stopped, a look of amusement on their face. "You think that will stop me?" They laughed, their voice echoing ominously in the small cabin. I took a step back, trying to find a way to protect Sarah. "Help is on the way," I yelled, hoping to intimidate them. But the figure just smiled wider, as if my words only fueled their excitement. Before I could react, they lunged at me with the knife. I barely dodged, the blade grazing my arm. I fired my weapon, the gunshot ringing in the confined space. The figure stumbled back, but instead of falling, they disappeared into the shadows, vanishing as if they had never been there. "Get down!" I shouted to Sarah, ducking low as I prepared for a second attack. But nothing happened. The cabin fell eerily silent, and I quickly made my way to Sarah, frantically untying her. "Are you hurt?" I asked, my hands shaking. "I'm fine, but we need to get out of here," she said, her voice trembling. We rushed toward the door, and just as we stepped outside, backup arrived, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The officers quickly assessed the situation, and I relayed what had happened. They searched the area, but found no trace of the figure. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. As we left the cabin, I felt a sense of unease wash over me. Who was that person, and where did they go? Back at the station, I filed the report, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. That night, I lay awake, haunted by the images in the cabin and the chilling laughter of the figure. The case remained open, and I knew that the mystery of Hollow Creek would linger in my mind for a long time. In the weeks that followed, Sarah recovered, but the memory of that night haunted both of us. I would often drive by the river, glancing into the shadows, half expecting to see that figure watching from the trees. Some nights, I still heard whispers carried by the wind, reminding me that darkness can take many forms, and not all of them can be seen. As a police officer in the quiet town of Maplewood, I often prided myself on how peaceful our community was. The most excitement I had encountered was dealing with the occasional bar fight or the odd prank call. But that all changed one fateful night in October 2022, when I was called to investigate a series of strange occurrences at the old Maplewood Asylum, a place that had long been abandoned and was rumored to be haunted. The asylum, built in the late 1800s, was notorious for its dark history. It housed the mentally ill, and countless patients were subjected to inhumane treatments. The townspeople had avoided it for decades, claiming it was cursed. When I received the call about strange noises coming from the asylum, I felt a mix of apprehension and curiosity. As I arrived at the scene, the full moon illuminated the crumbling structure, casting long shadows that danced in the wind. My partner, Officer Jensen, and I stepped out of the cruiser, flashlights in hand. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, broken only by the rustle of leaves. "Let's get this over with," Jensen said, his voice wavering slightly. I nodded in agreement, trying to shake off the unease settling in my stomach. We made our way to the front door, which creaked ominously as we pushed it open. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of mold and decay. "Anyone here?" I called out, but only silence answered. As we stepped further into the asylum, the shadows seemed to twist around us, and I could almost hear whispers echoing through the halls. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. This was just an old building. There was no reason to be scared. We explored the first floor, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. In one hallway, we discovered a door slightly ajar. A strange noise, like a faint cry, drifted from within. I exchanged a glance with Jensen before we pushed the door open. Inside was a room filled with old medical equipment, rusted and forgotten. The noise grew louder, a low moan that sent chills down my spine. "Hello?" I called again, stepping cautiously into the room. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us, plunging us into darkness. "What the hell?" Jensen exclaimed, fumbling for his flashlight. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Stay calm," I said, my heart racing. "We'll figure this out." Just then, the moaning stopped, replaced by a soft, eerie laughter that echoed around us. Jensen and I exchanged terrified glances. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I banged on the door, shouting for it to open, but it remained stubbornly shut. The laughter grew louder, morphing into a chorus of voices that seemed to come from all directions. "Get out," they echoed, chilling me to the bone. I could feel panic rising within me, but I forced myself to focus. I turned to the window, my only hope for escape. "Help me with this," I said, pointing to the window. We both rushed over, trying to pry it open, but it was stuck. The laughter intensified, and I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, sending shivers down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Just as I was about to give up, the door swung open, and I stumbled backward, falling to the ground. Standing in the doorway was a figure, a young woman, her face pale and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to pierce through me. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice a haunting whisper. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging through me. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Leave this place," she warned, stepping forward. "They won't let you go." I glanced at Jensen, who was frozen in place, his expression one of pure terror. "We need to get out of here," I shouted, grabbing his arm. As we rushed past her, the lights began to flicker, and the laughter transformed into screams, echoing through the halls. I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps behind us as we sprinted down the corridor, the oppressive darkness closing in. We made our way toward the entrance, the door in sight, but it felt like we were running in slow motion. I could feel a cold breath on my neck, and I dared not look back. Finally, we burst through the door and into the night, collapsing on the grass outside. "Did you see that?" Jensen gasped, his face pale. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I replied, struggling to catch my breath. "But we need to call for backup." I fumbled for my radio, but to my dismay, it was dead. The realization hit me hard. We were alone. I glanced back at the asylum, its silhouette looming ominously against the moonlit sky. The laughter had faded, but the feeling of being watched lingered. "Let's get to the cruiser," I said, motioning for Jensen to follow. As we made our way back, the shadows seemed to shift around us, and I felt an unsettling presence lurking just beyond my line of sight. Once inside the cruiser, I locked the doors and started the engine. "What do we do now?" Jensen asked, his hands shaking. "We report this," I said, my voice steady, "and we tell them what happened." As we drove away from the asylum, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. The image of that woman's face haunted my thoughts. Who was she, and what had happened to her? The next day, I returned to the station and filed a report. My sergeant listened intently, but I could tell he was skeptical. "It was probably just kids messing around," he said dismissively. "That place has been abandoned for years." I knew what I saw, but my colleagues didn't seem to believe me. I decided to return to the asylum with a team, hoping to prove that something sinister was indeed lurking within its walls. When we arrived, the atmosphere was tense. We split up into groups, each armed with flashlights and body cameras. As we explored the building, the sense of unease returned, and the shadows seemed to follow us. In the same room where we encountered the young woman, we discovered something chilling. Old patient records scattered across the floor. They detailed the mistreatment of the residents, their screams echoing through time. It was then that I realized the laughter and screams we heard the previous night weren't just figments of our imagination. They were the echoes of the souls trapped within the asylum. As we delved deeper into the asylum's history, we unearthed stories of abuse, neglect, and unexplained deaths. The ghosts of the past lingered, their suffering etched into the very walls of the building. That night, as we prepared to leave, I felt a heavy weight in the air. The whispers returned, chilling me to the bone. "Get out," they warned again. I turned to my fellow officers, but they looked just as frightened. "We need to go," I urged, sensing the urgency in their expressions. As we fled the asylum, I glanced back one last time, and for a brief moment, I saw her. The young woman with the haunting eyes, standing in the doorway, watching us leave. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to warn us, trying to protect us from the darkness that resided within. To this day, the echoes of Maplewood Asylum haunt my thoughts. The stories of the lost souls cry out for justice, and I can't help but feel that our visit awakened something that should have remained undisturbed. The asylum still stands, a silent witness to its dark past, and while I know I can never return, the memories will linger, a reminder that some places hold more than just history. They hold the echoes of those who suffered and the spirits who refuse to be forgotten. It was a chilly night in late September when I received a call that would forever change my perspective on the job. I was working the night shift in a small town just outside of Boston, known as Crescent Hill. The streets were quiet, and the only sounds were the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional bark of a dog. I was prepared for the usual disturbances, loud parties, a couple of drunks, maybe a domestic dispute. What I wasn't prepared for was what I would encounter that night. Around 11 p.m., dispatch alerted us to a series of strange occurrences reported by residents near the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. People claimed to have seen a figure moving between the tombstones, accompanied by the sound of what seemed like whispers. My partner, Officer Taylor, and I exchanged skeptical glances. We had both heard the legends about the cemetery, but we dismissed them as mere ghost stories meant to scare kids. "Let's check it out," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We drove to the cemetery, its wrought iron gate creaking as we pulled in. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow on the headstones. The air was still, heavy with an unshakable sense of foreboding. As we stepped out of the cruiser, I felt a chill run down my spine. The whispers had quieted, leaving an unsettling silence. We decided to split up, thinking it would be more efficient to cover more ground. I walked along the overgrown path, scanning the area with my flashlight. The beam of light danced across the gravestones, illuminating names etched in stone, many of which dated back over a century. "Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice breaking the stillness. No response. Just as I was beginning to feel foolish for investigating such a silly report, I heard it. A soft rustling, followed by a quiet, almost childlike giggle. My heart raced. "Taylor?" I called out, but there was no answer. The rustling grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of footsteps. I turned in the direction of the noise, shining my flashlight into the shadows. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure dart between the tombstones, something small and dark. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice echoing. "This isn't funny. If you're playing a prank, you need to leave." Silence. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I continued walking, determined to find the source of the sound. The further I went, the more I felt like I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and every instinct told me to turn back. Just as I was about to do so, I heard Taylor's voice from the other side of the cemetery. "Hey, I think I found something." I rushed towards the sound, but as I got closer, the air became heavy, as if the weight of the night was pressing down on me. I rounded a large mausoleum, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Taylor was standing in front of an old grave, his flashlight beam illuminating a headstone. But that wasn't what sent chills down my spine. It was the figure kneeling beside it, a small child, wearing an old-fashioned white dress, her back turned to us. "Tay, what the hell?" I whispered, frozen in place. Taylor turned, his expression one of confusion and concern. "I thought it was a real kid," he replied, stepping closer. "But she doesn't seem to notice us." Before I could respond, the child turned her head, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. Her face was pale, eyes wide and empty, devoid of any color or life. I stepped back instinctively, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the ground, her finger trembling, as if she was trying to communicate something important. My heart raced as I looked down, noticing a disturbance in the dirt near the grave. The soil appeared freshly turned, as if someone had recently buried something, or someone. "Maybe we should call for backup," Taylor suggested, his voice shaky. I nodded, feeling the weight of dread settle in my chest. But before I could reach for my radio, the child stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. "Help me," she whispered, the sound echoing around us like a haunting melody. I glanced at Taylor, but he was paralyzed with fear. The child took a step forward, and I felt the urge to run, to escape this nightmare. But before I could react, she pointed to a nearby tombstone, a name etched in the stone that I recognized: Elizabeth Carter. "She's here," the child said, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt a chill wash over me as I remembered the local lore about Elizabeth Carter, a girl who had disappeared over 100 years ago, never to be found. Legend had it that her spirit still roamed the cemetery, searching for her lost family. I looked at the child, feeling an inexplicable connection, a pull that urged me to help her. "Elizabeth?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is that you?" The child nodded, her expression a mix of sorrow and longing. "They won't let me go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I need to be free." Panic surged within me as I realized the implication of her words. "Who won't let you go?" I demanded, my heart racing. Before she could respond, the atmosphere shifted, the temperature dropped, and the whispers returned, swirling around us like a storm. The shadows deepened, and I felt a presence behind me, something dark and oppressive. "Get out!" it echoed, a voice filled with rage and pain. "Run!" I yelled at Taylor, and we bolted towards the entrance. I could feel the darkness closing in, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. As we reached the gate, I glanced back one last time. The child was standing there, her eyes pleading, but the shadows were wrapping around her, pulling her back. We jumped into the cruiser, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. "Drive!" I shouted, and Taylor didn't hesitate. He slammed the gas pedal, and we sped away from the cemetery, the darkness receding behind us. Once we were safely out of the cemetery, we pulled over to collect our thoughts. I could feel the adrenaline still coursing through me. "What just happened?" Taylor gasped, his voice shaky. "I don't know," I admitted, my mind racing. "But we can't tell anyone about this. They'll think we're crazy." We agreed to file a standard report about the strange noises, but left out the details about the child and the grave. The following days were a blur as we tried to process the events of that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that Elizabeth was still out there, trapped in the shadows of the cemetery, waiting for someone to help her find peace. Weeks passed, but the memory of that encounter stayed with me. I returned to the cemetery several times, hoping to see the child again, but she never appeared. I often wondered if she was still there, still searching for freedom. Though I continued my work as an officer, I couldn't help but feel a strange connection to the past and the spirits that lingered in Crescent Hill. That night had opened my eyes to the mysteries that lay hidden in our world, and I knew that some shadows would never truly fade. As a police officer in a small town in the Midwest, my nights were usually quiet and uneventful. However, that all changed one fateful evening in November 2021. I was patrolling the outskirts of town when I received a call that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Unit 22, we've got a report of a suspicious vehicle parked near the old Miller estate," came the voice over the radio. "Witnesses say they've seen someone inside." The Miller estate had been abandoned for years, known for its eerie reputation and dark past. It was a relic from a time long gone, and many believed it was haunted. Most locals avoided it, and the mention of it sent shivers down their spines. I could feel my stomach tighten as I acknowledged the call, my instincts screaming that something was off. As I drove toward the estate, the moon hung low, casting an unsettling glow over the overgrown yard. The trees swayed gently in the wind, creating ghostly shadows that danced across the ground. I parked my cruiser a safe distance from the house, my heart racing as I stepped out. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. I approached the front of the house, flashlight in hand, scanning the area. The air was cold, and a strange heaviness seemed to hang over the property. As I got closer, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. A wave of unease washed over me, but I pressed on, my curiosity pushing me forward. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty halls. "This is Officer Collins. Is anyone here?" There was no response, just the sound of the wind whistling through the broken windows. I stepped inside, the old floorboards creaking under my weight. The interior was dark and musty, filled with dust and debris. Cobwebs hung in every corner, and I could barely make out the shapes of furniture shrouded in sheets. My flashlight beam swept across the room, revealing the remnants of a life long forgotten. The sense of foreboding grew stronger with each step I took. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a faint rustling coming from the back of the house. I turned, heart pounding, and cautiously made my way toward the sound. As I approached, I could feel the temperature drop, the air thickening around me. I called out again, but there was still no answer. I reached the doorway, leading to what appeared to be the kitchen. The rustling intensified, and I took a deep breath, pushing the door open. What I saw sent chills down my spine. In the corner of the room stood a figure, hunched over and shrouded in darkness. "Hey, show me your hands!" I shouted, instinctively reaching for my sidearm. The figure slowly turned, and my blood ran cold. It was a woman, her face gaunt and pale, eyes wide with terror. "Please, help me," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. I could see fear etched on her face, and my instincts kicked in. "Are you hurt? What happened?" I asked, trying to remain calm. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "They're coming for me. You need to leave." Before I could ask who she was referring to, I heard footsteps approaching from behind. Panic surged within me as I turned, scanning the darkened hallway. "Stay behind me," I ordered, positioning myself between her and the doorway. The footsteps grew louder, and just as I was about to call for backup, a man appeared at the entrance, his eyes wild and frantic. "Get out! You have to get out now!" he shouted, pushing past me into the kitchen. "What's going on?" I demanded, confused and alarmed. He grabbed the woman's arm, desperation in his eyes. "They're coming. We need to leave." I tried to process what was happening. "Who's coming?" I asked, my voice firm. The man looked back at me, his expression shifting from panic to something darker. "It's too late," he whispered, his gaze shifting to the shadows behind me. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The temperature dropped even further, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was as if the very air had become alive with a dark energy. The woman began to tremble, clutching the man's arm tightly. "They're here," she gasped, her voice shaking. I could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the halls, growing closer. "We have to go now." In a split second, I made a decision. "Stay close to me," I ordered, my voice steady. I ushered them toward the front door, adrenaline pumping through my veins. As we moved, I could hear whispers filling the air, incoherent, but filled with malice. "Out the back," I yelled, pointing toward the kitchen exit. We burst through the door, stumbling into the backyard. The moonlight illuminated the area, and I could see the overgrown grass and the outline of the trees surrounding the property. But just as we reached the edge of the yard, I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from inside the house. I turned back, instincts urging me to investigate. "Wait here," I shouted to the woman and the man, but they were frozen in fear, staring at the house. I took a step back toward the door, determined to uncover the truth. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. I stepped inside again, flashlight in hand, scanning the shadows. The scream echoed again, and I rushed down the hallway, trying to locate its source. The kitchen was empty, and so was the living room. My heart raced as I moved through the house, every instinct telling me to leave. But I had to know what was happening. Then I heard it, a faint crying sound coming from the basement door. "Hello?" I called out, approaching the door slowly. "Is anyone down there?" I took a deep breath and opened the door, revealing a set of steep, dark stairs leading down into the abyss. The crying grew louder, echoing in the dark. Against my better judgment, I descended the stairs, flashlight beam piercing the gloom. As I reached the bottom, the crying stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence. I could barely see the outlines of old furniture and boxes stacked haphazardly. "Hello?" I called again, but no one responded. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a whisper, clear and chilling. "Stay with us." Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee. But something held me back, an invisible force pulling me deeper into the basement. I stumbled, trying to regain my footing, but I could feel the darkness wrapping around me, suffocating and cold. I finally broke free, bolting back up the stairs and bursting through the door, gasping for breath. As I emerged into the moonlight, I looked around for the woman and the man, but they were gone. My heart sank as I realized I was alone. Desperation gripped me, and I ran back to the cruiser, frantically calling for backup. The shadows of the estate loomed behind me, whispering secrets I dared not understand. When the other officers arrived, we searched the house and the surrounding area, but there was no sign of the two individuals. Weeks passed after that night, and the case remained open, but cold. No one could explain what happened in the Miller estate, and the woman and man were never found. I tried to move on, but the memory haunted me, replaying in my mind like a broken record. Each time I drove past the estate, I felt the weight of the darkness pressing against me. It became a constant reminder that some places are better left undisturbed, and some calls are best left unanswered. The shadows of the Miller estate still linger in my thoughts, a chilling reminder of that fateful night when I faced the unknown and barely escaped with my life. The crisp air of autumn carried an unusual stillness that night as I began my patrol shift in a quiet suburb of Ohio. I had been on the force for nearly a decade, and while I had seen my share of bizarre calls, I never anticipated that this night would unfold into a chilling experience I would never forget. It was around 2 a.m. when dispatch relayed a report about strange noises coming from the old Ravenwood Park. It was a well-known local spot, famous for its playground and scenic walking trails during the day. But once night fell, it became a ghost town. Most of us on the force had heard stories about the park, tales of mysterious sightings and strange occurrences, but I always chalked them up to urban legends meant to scare children. I arrived at the park, my cruiser's headlights piercing the darkness. The beam illuminated the empty swings, swaying slightly in the breeze, casting eerie shadows across the gravel path. I stepped out, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the only sound breaking the silence. I approached the playground, calling out, "This is Officer Miller. Is anyone there?" The wind whispered through the trees, but there was no response. I decided to investigate further, my flashlight cutting through the darkness as I walked along the path that led deeper into the park. That's when I heard it, a soft, almost melodic humming coming from the direction of the woods. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound. The deeper I went, the more the trees closed in around me, their gnarled branches reaching like skeletal fingers. The humming grew louder, more distinct. It sounded almost like a child's lullaby. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Hello?" I called out again, but the only reply was the rustling of leaves. I was about to turn back when I caught sight of something through the trees, a faint glow. Curious, I pushed through the underbrush, my heart pounding. As I stepped into a small clearing, I was met with a sight that took my breath away. There, illuminated by an otherworldly light, was a group of children, all sitting in a circle. They looked to be no older than 8 or 9, their faces pale and expressionless. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, as if they had stepped out of a time long past. The humming came from them, a haunting tune that seemed to wrap around me, tugging at something deep within. I felt an inexplicable urge to join them, to be a part of whatever was happening in that clearing. "Hey, you kids shouldn't be out here alone," I shouted, trying to sound authoritative, but my voice trembled. The children turned their heads in unison, their eyes wide and unblinking. It was unsettling, the way they all moved at once, as if they were connected by some unseen force. One child, a girl with long dark hair and a white dress, stood up and stepped closer. "We're waiting," she said, her voice soft but echoing strangely in the still air. "Waiting for the others." I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to get away. "What others? Where are your parents?" I demanded, trying to maintain my composure. The girl simply smiled, a chilling smile that didn't reach her eyes. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet felt unstable. I stumbled, and in that instant, the humming stopped. A heavy silence enveloped the clearing, and I could feel the air grow cold. The children exchanged glances, and I realized I had made a terrible mistake by approaching them. "Help us," the girl said again, her voice now a low whisper. "We need to go home." Panic surged through me. "Okay, let's get you out of here," I said, backing away slowly, trying to keep my eyes on the children. But the more I moved, the more the air around me thickened, as if I was wading through water. Then, without warning, the children began to laugh. It was a sound that sent ice coursing through my veins, high-pitched and mocking, echoing through the trees. I turned to run, heart racing, but the path I had followed was gone. The trees closed in around me, branches twisting into grotesque shapes, blocking my escape. "Where are you going?" the girl called, her voice now laced with a sinister edge. "You can't leave." Desperation fueled my flight as I pushed through the branches, ignoring the scratches on my arms. The laughter faded into a low chant, a rhythmic sound that seemed to follow me, urging me to stop. "Stay with us. Stay with us." I burst through the trees, finally stumbling back onto the main path of the park. I could hear the echoes of the children behind me, their laughter mingling with the whispering wind. Without looking back, I sprinted to my cruiser, fumbling for my keys as I tried to steady my shaking hands. The moment I got inside, I locked the doors and started the engine. My heart was pounding in my chest as I drove away from the park, the shadows of the trees looming in my rearview mirror. I could still hear the faint sound of the children's voices, lingering like a ghostly echo in my mind. I reported the incident to dispatch, but when backup arrived, there was nothing unusual to find. No children, No strange noises, just the empty park under the dim glow of the streetlights. The sergeant laughed it off, suggesting I might have imagined it, but I knew what I had seen. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I drove past the park several times, but I never dared to enter again. The memory of the children haunted me, their laughter ringing in my ears like a warning. Weeks later, a missing person report came across my desk. A little girl named Emily, who had vanished in that very area a year prior. My heart sank as I read the details. Emily had been playing in the park when she disappeared, and despite exhaustive searches, she was never found. I realized then that the children I had encountered were not just figments of my imagination. They were lost souls, forever trapped in that clearing, waiting for someone to join them. The park was no longer just a place of childhood joy. It had become a realm of sorrow, a reminder that some mysteries should remain unsolved. As I patrolled the streets, I kept my eyes open, hoping to never hear that haunting lullaby again. But deep down, I knew I could never truly escape the midnight watch I had taken on that fateful night.